Good evening and welcome to Ron Bennington Interviews. I'm Ron Bennington. With me tonight is Gail Bennington, and so happy to be talking to one of America's great songwriters, Steve Earle. Tonight he's here to talk about his album, So You Want to Be an Outlaw.
I'm such a fan of this album. Steve Earle is absolutely legendary, but I think there's something really truly special about this new album.
Yeah, Steve Earle goes at every album with a unique point of view for that album. It's always interesting to me that you can listen to one album and you go, okay, that's Steve Earle, and then listen to another album and you're like, oh no, this is Steve Earle. But then you dig both those places that he goes. The album is So You Want to Be an Outlaw. Stay tuned as Ron Bennington interviews Steve Earle. Looking for a woman that's So You Want to Be an Outlaw, and Steve Earle is here with us. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. How are you?
First of all, congratulations for this album. Really
Thanks.
Cool.
Really proud of it. I mean, we it was sort of kind of started organically. T-Bone Burnett asked me to write a song for Nashville for the TV show several years ago, and I was sort of writing 3 records at once the way it turned out, because Sean Colvin and I were writing songs for the record we made together. I was finishing songs for a blues record I was making. And then he asked me for a song for that this one character in the show was supposed to have written. It was the first year, and he was still the music supervisor. And he just I wrote the song. They used it in the show. And then the next year, Buddy Miller took over, who's also a friend of mine. He asked me for a song for Nashville. So I wrote that. They didn't end up using it because the music supervisor vetoed it for some reason. But I had 2 country songs, and I just sort of thought, well, maybe that's what the next record should be. And I'd been in this mode of listening to, I have Beatles records I listen to over and over again, in cycles over the years, and Stones records and Dylan records that I'm that way about. And they're, are Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings records that I listen to. Because they're a big part of who I am. And there's a Waylon Jennings record called Honky Tonk Heroes that came out in 73. It was made in 72, but it took him a while to talk RCA into releasing it. It's the same time that Willie made first Shotgun Willie and then Phases and Stages on Atlantic. And it sort of defined, what they call or what people later actually called outlaw country, and, what this channel that I'm on, on Sirius XM is all about, and it's based on that music. And it's a lot of people want to make it about something that it wasn't. What it was about was artistic freedom. It was country artists realizing that people in rock music were getting to make records the way that they wanted to, and they wanted to do that too. Yeah,
but it was always about strong lyrics too. It was always like, for me, I remember the first time that I started to listen to Christopherson when I was a kid, and I'm like, wow, this is like a book or a movie or something.
Yeah, he's a Rhodes Scholar. Yeah, it's like country music. It was already pretty smart. Willie Nelson's a pretty smart guy. Yeah, and Willie's part of the generation that was there just before Chris got there. Chris was the first post-Bob Dylan songwriter. Him and Mickey Newbury, and Chris would have never gone if it hadn't been for Mickey Newbury. Newbury had a sort of a foot in both worlds because he was already an established songwriter that came to Nashville and brought songs all the time. Thank you. Before Dylan came along, Chris, then later the rest of us went to Nashville. Guy Clark. Towns bounced in and out of there, and we were all post-Bob Dylan songwriters. The exception is Billy Joe Shaver. He grew up the same time that Guy and Towns did, but I don't think he knew who Bob Dylan was, but he still ended up being this incredibly literate songwriter, just sort of organically, and I've never been able to figure it out. His stuff there's a whole record of his. Honky Tonk Heroes is all Billy Joe Shaver songs, which nobody had ever done that before.
I'm always... It's always amazing to hear about people that are songwriters, and you realize that there's an amazing amount of craft that takes place, but then there's something else kind of unexplainable, the way great songs will just pop in on people.
I do a songwriting camp, in Big Indian, New York, and it's coming up. This is the 4th one, I guess. And I can't make anybody a songwriter. They wasn't already a songwriter before they got there, but I can teach you something about how I write songs, which means if you're already a songwriter, you're a better one, and when you leave, and if you're not, then you'll know more about it, about the process. The things that I think are important in the songs, I am unapologetically a post Bob Dylan songwriter, and so to me, it's about, I am trying to write, literature. I'm trying to write something that is just as literate and just as poetic as anything that someone would put on a page, and you would consume like that. I don't, or a play or a screenplay. It's just, it's the medium I'm most comfortable in. I do other things. I've written a couple of books and a play. I'm working on a musical now, but songwriting is, I think it's what I was put here to do.
Do lyrics come to you first? Do you start with lyrics and then?
Not always. I do sometimes. Sometimes it's simultaneous, but and when that happens, it's usually like a verse and a chorus, or maybe just a chorus, and then the rest of it gets to be more work. And some things I just can't figure out where they come from. But I do assignments. I wrote Ellis Unit 1 for Dead Man Walking because Tim Robbins asked me to. I wrote a song called Some Dreams, which is over the closing credits in The Rookie, and that was fun because, it's a movie about baseball. It's a chick movie for guys is what it is. And it's like, I love that movie. But it's just, I like having an assignment, because I want to try to keep writing. And as you get older, it gets harder to trick yourself into, getting up and doing something every day that nobody's making you punch the clock. And so I sort of welcome, projects, being asked to write a song for somebody specifically or for a specific purpose in a film or a television show.
Well, the musical, so there has to be the thematic idea first before you even attempt to write songs for that. You have to say, this is about this. So what are you going to be writing about?
Well, I made a record in the year I moved to New York in 2005 called Washington Square Serenade. And when I started it, I had it in my head that maybe it was a musical. Then I chickened out and I finished the album. Now, so there's some of the songs, 3 or 4 that aren't part of the original song cycle, but I've gone back to the idea of developing that into a musical and probably writing the book myself. I'm talking to a production company in town. I don't really want to say who yet. But they've got the songs, they've got my synopsis, and so I'm waiting back to hear from them. And I probably won't give up if they don't like it. I've been working on it for a while. I've got another couple of projects that I'm just doing music for, and I've sort of hung my shingle up. I'm available to write lyrics if you
if you need
to write just lyrics or songs or whatever you want for your theater piece. I'd be glad to look at it and see if there's anything that I can do.
Well, Washington Square Park has been this gathering place for people who play and write songs for
a long time.
For a long, long time.
And it's also the thing that most people don't know about it. And my show's based on that it's been a gathering place where people come to play songs. And the characters in it are people that hang out in the park and busk and sort of spend a lot of their lives there. But the other thing you have to know about the park, and if you don't know it, you'll learn it from my musical, is that there's 20,000 people buried underneath Washington Square Park. It was a potter's field. And it's my neighborhood. It's my front yard. It's my little boy thinks it's his front yard. And, I know the history of the neighborhood pretty well. I just sort of became obsessed with it when I first got here. And and it was a lot of other things after that. And that becomes sort of one of the narratives, like the master narrative for this piece is the history of the park itself. Yeah.
It's also been a place of political resistance since, this country about started, that whenever something would come up, whether it was anti-war or unionizing, they would start in that
and then
park.
also Judson Memorial Church on the south side of the park. That was, they put up the numbers, the number of people killed in Vietnam every day of the Vietnam War, and they did the same thing beginning when this last war started.
The new album for Steve is So You Want to Be an Outlaw. And there's a song on this album that just kicked me right in the chest as soon as I heard it, because I felt like it was my own story, but knew it was from Colorado, which I think as you grow older, people would understand the song.
Yeah, it's actually, the song is a song that Allison Moore, my ex-wife, and my niece Emily Earle started, and I just wanted to make sure it got finished. So I kind of butted in and helped them finish it. And Emily recorded it on a EP that she put out last year. She may record it again. She's really close to a record deal in Nashville, but I decided I'm really, really proud of the song and think it's beautiful and love playing it and singing it.
Let's play it real quick, okay?
Sure.
So this is from So You Want to Be an Outlaw. This one is News from Colorado. And that is off So You Want to Be an Outlaw. Steve Earle sitting in with us. And that's a song that hung around for a while, huh? Before it was finished.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was, I think, probably Allison and Emily probably started it maybe 4 years ago, something like that. And then I finished it, and it sat around for a little bit. So it's probably the oldest song of all the songs on the record. It's written before any of the other ones were.
But that's the other thing about songwriting. Some of them come in 15, 20 minutes, and the other you just toil with for...
Yeah, and sometimes things will be sitting around. You realize it fits someplace that didn't really have a home before. And that's sort of the case in this. I mean, most of this record's, me on the back pickup of Fender Telecaster. There's only like 3 or 4 acoustic things on it. There's this. There's a song called Goodbye Michelangelo that closes the record that I wrote for Guy Clark, who was my teacher, who passed away this last year. And, there's just... and a song called Girl from the Mountain. Then I played mandolin on one track, and then the rest of it I'm playing electric guitar. And that was just, it's the Waylon thing. I was just basically channeling Waylon Jennings unapologetically for the whole record.
Do you remember when you first heard Waylon? Was it?
Yeah, probably on television. I think like one of there were 50 syndicated country music shows that were on the air in the 60s and 70s. And I think the first time I heard Waylon, it was probably doing it was either Just to Satisfy You or Only Daddy That'll Walk the Line. I think it was Only Daddy That'll Walk the Line, and it was and this I said this guy's different. He's playing electric guitar and he's I watched the Johnny Cash show religiously, and because I could see, it made me not feel so weird about wearing cowboy boots and having long hair, both where I grew up in Texas. And there was, you saw Merle Haggard and you saw Bob Dylan and Derek and the Dominoes. And
it was an amazing show.
On the same show. It was the best music shows on were, ever were. When I grew up watching just as I was starting to play guitar, the Smothers Brothers, which the summer replacement for that was a Glenn Campbell show. And then that morphed into Glenn's own show. And then the Johnny Cash show. And then there's all those syndicated shows. Buck Owens had a great TV show. And, I heard Buck Owens on the same radio station that I heard the Beatles on, because songs like Tiger by the Tail crossed over and were played on rock and roll stations. So at least in Texas.
I totally remember that as well. And it was just, they were just looking for songs at that time before they had the chance to break them into genres completely, the way that we've learned to do. But Cash's show, I remember Linda Ronstadt doing
Linda Ronstadt
that show.
was on it, and it's funny because you can trace it back to several things like Neil Young, Linda Ronstadt. Linda being in town to do the Johnny Cash show, the vocals on Hard to Go were put on that week because she happened to be there doing the Johnny Cash
Is
show.
that right?
Yeah. So it was the last year that it was on the air. And it's also the trip that Neil bought, that Martin D28 that he still owns. It's belonged to 2 people ever. It belonged to Hank Williams and it belonged to Neil Young.
That's crazy, right?
So.
Neil is one of those guys who seems to kind of wear it well. Willie, this last album that I heard of Willie's was just unbelievable.
Yeah, it's
it
really,
is
really good
so interesting that some of the music is always aimed at a youth culture, but then other people can just ride that wave. And Cash's like last albums are some of my favorite.
Yeah, those are great records,
did.
and Rick Rubin, is owed. Everybody owes him a debt because he saw that those records got made. Because Cash, probably would have given up. I think, and Rick managed to get him going and get him interested in himself as an artist again. I ended up. I didn't. He recorded The Devil's Right Hand. It's just a guitar and vocal version of it. The very last record that he made, and I just which was an honor for me because I knew Cash a little. He's like I played on a Johnny Cash record not too long after I got out of jail. It was John's track for the Dead Man Walking soundtrack. The band on it. Ry Cooder called me and he said, "Hey, I'm coming to do this Johnny Cash track for Dead Man. I already done my track and turned it in." He said, and he was one of the music supervisors on it. He said, I'm bringing I'm going to bring Jim Dickinson and Joaquin, his son, who was 17 at the time and already a great drummer. He said, I need you to get me an upright bass player and a gospel, like quartet, vocal group. I tried to call the Fairfield Four, but they were in Europe, and I'd used them on records. So I got the Nashville Bluegrass Band to actually do kind of the white version of that pretty well themselves, because there's a thing they call the Tennessee Gospel Quartet, which is, it's just they'll put the bluegrass bands do it, and they'll put the instruments down, just gather around the microphone and sing a gospel song, and the Nashville Bluegrass Band does that really, really well. So I got those guys to do the background vocals. The great Roy Heskey Jr., who's no longer with us, but was the best doghouse bass player in town. He played bass, and of course Jim Dickinson came in and played piano. So the only time I got on a record with Jim Dickinson, and he and I talked about that for a long time. It's one of my few regrets is I never made a record with Jim as producer. But I knew him from all the trips I made over to Memphis. I made Copperhead over there, and he was around. I made I mixed records there and produced records there, and he was always around. And we never did work together except on that one Johnny Cash record. So. Johnny Cash was a very big deal to me, and all of my life, and so being where I'm from, were Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson.
Do you think that, kind of like you were saying, Cash, Willie Nelson, do you think that country music or even just singer-songwriter kind of lends itself to that elongated career, like getting better with age and getting...
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're really saying something and it's not, it's not strictly about... If you're making art that's not strictly about sex, then yeah, it can last
Right.
longer. It's one of those. It's one of those things, and your audience grows older with you. I think it's weird. Over the years, I think I probably have more women at my shows than I have in a long time. As I've gotten older, it's kind of strange, but it's also certain. I know some of it's some songs that I've written as I've gotten older, so that I probably didn't write in my 30s and 40s, but it's just that thing of if you're really a writer, then you kind of find a way. I think people know that they know that it's you, and what you got to be willing to do. And the one thing I can't teach anybody to do, and I've known a few people that have tried, and they were smart enough, they knew they were listening to all the right stuff, but if you're not willing to give it up a little bit, if you're not willing to be to expose a little bit of yourself, then you're not going to be able to compete with people that do.
Right.
It's one of those things, because people have come to expect that, because what they're looking for, they're not looking to see somebody hurt. What they want is empathy, and you have to sort of peel down to a layer where you're putting a little bit of blood on it to create something that is about your experience, but when somebody else listens to it, they go, "Oh, that happened to me."
Yeah.
Right.
They don't care about the specifics. They don't care so much that you got your heart broke. They care that they've had their hearts broken too, and that you are accurately describing, as far as they can tell, how that feels.
Yeah. Now, do you think even being in recovery made you a better writer because of that you're sharing?
Well, I think it made me a better everything,
Yeah.
but because it's kind of hard to do stuff when you're really loaded. But I was lucky. I never bought the idea that there was anything performance enhancing about any of the drugs that I took. And anything that I did, I never believed it. I knew I was impaired.
Right. But I mean the daily task of staying sober and being around other people who are being sober. There's an honesty there that I didn't find most places.
That's true. That's absolutely true. I mean, I wrote pretty good songs before I got sober, but I think the first song I wrote sober was "Goodbye," and it's like, Yeah, there's blood on it, and it's like it's an out of sequence ninth step in the key of C is what it is. The very first thing that I wrote.
That's great.
When I got a guitar, my hands on a guitar for the first time after I got sober.
Camp Copperhead is also happening June 26th through the 30th. And this is, people can sign up for this. You talk about it, you do some songwriting there with them. And even for people that are never going to do this professionally, there seems to be something to me positive about having a creative outlet.
Yeah, you
in
don't.
Your life.
Everybody can try to write songs, and it's the food's really good, and their cell phones don't work there, and it's a big indie in New York, which is old school Catskills, like probably 30 minutes west of Woodstock, and it's just that idea of I don't paint very well, but I paint.
Right.
And it's important that I do it. And I started doing it again recently because I've the last couple of years I've been in an apartment where I can. I've got really good light. I'm on the fourth floor facing south, overlooking, kind of a garden space. And it's a weird place in Greenwich Village where I live. But it's like the perfect, painter's apartment. So I feel like it's a waste if I don't paint.
I just think painting is a great example that I never painted at all until, I was well into my adulthood. And I remember painting, and then the next time I went to the museum, it just exploded. It was an experience that I had never had before.
It's absolutely true.
And I was walking up and I'm looking at some of these things. I'm like, oh, I can kind of see his fingerprint there. I can see the brush. You get the physicality.
Yeah. And it's like writing haiku is something, which is a Japanese poetic form that was designed for everyone to do. Now, there are masters and the people that are, that were poets that write, and there are poets that write haiku. But it was designed to be poetry for everybody, a poetic form that everybody participated in.
I think it's something that we kind of forget about, that people realize, that before television and even radio, people had to sit around at night and try to
entertain themselves.
Entertain
Try
themselves.
to keep from killing each other.
And you would kind of have family bands or people just reading to each other.
Yeah, that's folk music. That's what it is, and it's why, a lot of it came from the South, because there was more isolated communities further and further apart, less for people to do than there was, say, on the East Coast, where there's bigger communities and more things you could think of to go out and distract yourself every night. So people till then wireless radios that ran on batteries came along. That's huge, because even like Lyndon Johnson became Lyndon Johnson in Texas politics because he brought electricity to the hill country in Texas. That's that expensive real estate west of Austin out there. He got electricity out there in the late 50s and early 60s before there was electricity there. People don't realize that there were lots of the country. I can remember no inside plumbing in my grandparents' house in the early 60s. No inside plumbing. They had electricity, but it was bare light bulbs hanging from the ceiling, and the telephone was a party line with a phone that you had to crank. And that was 1963 or 4. Technology's made such huge leaps forward. So radios that ran on batteries made it possible for people that lived in houses where there was no electricity, which there were a lot of in the 30s and 40s, to listen to the radio, and then radio exploded. So there's always some sort of technological advance that sort of pushes art along. And that's one of them.
Yeah, I had Earle in here, and he was telling me, like, Woody Guthrie didn't even see electric light until he was well along, that it was basically camping. Every night of his life, they were like lanterns. The new album is So You Want to Be an Outlaw, and let's send you off with Fixin' to Die, which you guys come at it pretty hard on this one.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I think when I wrote it pretty late in the process, and we rocked pretty hard, whatever you wanted to, how you wanted to describe what we were playing. So we kind of had to have something, but this is like, there's an old country tradition in songs about people that they're being getting ready to be executed that are guilty as hell of something really bad that they did. So,
Thanks so much for being here, man. We'll see you next time.
thank you.